Have a seat, everybody. Good afternoon. Before we begin today's meeting of my Economic Advisory Board, I wanted to say a few words about one of the topics that we'll be discussing and something that's one of our most important economic issues of our time, the skills and education of our workforce. Because every business leader in this room knows that the single most important predictor of America's success in the 21st century is how well our workers can compete with workers all around the world. All of our education institutions, from our preschools to our universities, have a critical role to play here. But one of our most undervalued assets as a nation is our network of community colleges. These colleges don't just serve as a gateway to good jobs for millions of middle-class Americans. Community colleges also serve as a pool of talent from which businesses can draw trained, skilled workers. Unfortunately, because of the burden the recession has placed on state and local budgets, community colleges have been forced to cap enrollments and scrap courses. And even in the best of times, they receive far less funding than four-year colleges and universities. Not only is that not right, I think it's not smart. Not at a time when so many Americans are still looking for work, and not at a time when so many other nations are trying to out-educate us today so they can out-compete us tomorrow. We need to be doing more, not less, to equip our workers with the skills and training they need in the 21st century. It's an economic imperative. And so I've said that by the year 2020, I want to see an additional 5 million community college degrees and certificates in America. And to reach this goal, we're making an unprecedented investment in our community colleges, upgrading them, modernizing them, and challenging these schools to pursue innovative, research-oriented approaches to education. And I've asked Dr. Jill Biden, a community college educator for more than 17 years who's with us here today, to help promote community colleges around the country and lead the first ever White House Summit on community colleges, which will be taking place tomorrow. And I've asked this Economic Advisory Board to reach out to employers across the country and come up with new ways for businesses, community colleges, and other job training providers to work together. The results of their effort is an initiative called Skills for America's Future, which we'll be talking about today. And I want to thank Penny Pritzker and I believe Anna Berger, and perhaps some other folks around this table for putting in enormous amounts of time on this initiative. The idea here is simple. We want to make it easier to connect students looking for jobs with businesses looking to hire. We want to help community colleges and employers create programs that match curricula in the classroom with the needs of the boardrooms. We've already seen cases where this can work. Cisco, for example, has been working directly with community colleges to prepare students and workers for jobs ranging from work in broadband to health IT. And all over the country, we know that the most successful community colleges are those that partner with the private sector. So Skills for America's Future would help build on these success stories by connecting more employers, schools, and other job training providers and helping them share knowledge about what practices work best. The goal is to ensure that every state in the country has at least one strong partnership between a growing industry and a community college. And already companies from UTC to Accenture to the Gap have announced their support for this initiative, as well as business leaders like my friend Penny Pritzker and Aspen Institute's Walter Isaacson. I hope other business leaders will follow suit, and I'm also setting up a task force to work directly with the business community on this effort. This is one of those ideas that just makes sense. Investing in the skills and education of our workers and connecting them with potential employers is something that we should all be able to agree upon, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, business leaders or labor leaders. But it can only happen if we maintain our commitment to education. And so let me just make one last point before we start a broader discussion. I realize that we're facing an untenable fiscal situation. There was a $1.3 trillion deficit staring at me when I took office, and although the economic crisis and the steps we took to stop the free fall temporarily added to our fiscal challenges, it's clear that we're going to have to get serious about the deficit. And that's why I've proposed a 3-year freeze on non-security discretionary spending, That's why I've launched a bipartisan deficit reduction commission, which will be reporting in a few months. What I won't do is cut back on investments like education that are directly related to our long-term economic performance. Now is not the time to sacrifice our competitive edge in the global economy. And that's why I disagree so strongly with the proposal from some on the other side of the aisle to cut education by 20% in next year's budget. It's a cut that would eliminate 200,000 children from Head Start programs, would reduce financial aid for 8 million college students. It would leave community colleges without the resources they need to meet the goals that we've talked about today. And that just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm happy to have a debate about this issue in the coming months, but one thing I know is that this country will be stronger if all of our children get a world-class education. That means, by the way, not just money. It also means reform, and I'm glad to see Arne Duncan sitting here today, who's done as much to promote significant reform across the board than just about any education secretary in recent memory. Our businesses will be more successful if they can find skilled, trained workers here in America. Our future will be more secure if anybody who's willing to work hard is able to achieve their dream of getting a college education. And those are priorities that we all share. Those are investments that benefit the entire nation. And that's what we need to focus on right now. What will grow our economy, fuel our businesses, rebuild our middle class, and keep the American dream alive for the 21st century. So I look forward to working with all of you toward that common goal. And now, let's get down to the business of this meeting. I think they're going to remove this big thing here. And I'm going to be able to sit down and we'll have a good conversation. So, all right, somebody going to break this down? And I'll use this time to come around and say hello to everybody.
Thank you for all you're doing for community colleges.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. Hello, how are you? It's okay. Excuse me.
All right. Okay. Thank you, sir. All righty. Well, let's dive in. My understanding is that, and you tell me, Mr. Chairman, but I think that you are going to open up and introduce the subject, and then we're going to hear from Penny and Anna, both of who worked very diligently on the Skills for America's Future.
Well, let me say, first of all, we appreciate your presence and welcome your secretaries and advisors here, Secretary Geithner and Duncan and Locke. I tell you, we ought to have some impact on something. And we have a feeling that, we've made some contributions in the past. I might even mention regulatory reform, but infrastructure bank, which you've just been talking about, and weatherization, Homestar. We had this nice program of tax review, which we arrived at no conclusion, but rather demonstrated the problems in the tax system. But anyway, today is on, as you know, Skills for America. You've already introduced it. Penny was the driver so far as we were concerned. We approved the program and its specifics an hour or so ago. So Penny, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, Mr. President, Chairman Volker, and our friends as members of the PRAB, today the PRAB voted to recommend to you a new workforce development initiative, as you know, called Skills for America's Future. It's a very exciting collaboration of the private sector, labor, the federal government agencies, and the community colleges. And during the past year, the PRAB subcommittee on education and training has talked with scores of employers, educators, labor, and policy leaders to solicit their views on workforce development challenges. We convened a series of meetings with 7 different sectors of our economy: technology, healthcare, financial services, small businesses, energy and utilities, service and retail, as well as manufacturing and construction. And through these meetings, we identified public-private partnerships as one of the most effective ways that we can improve the skills and credentials that American workers and students are receiving. So we also looked at the best practices of 5 companies that are doing an excellent job of improving and developing workers' skills. These companies are Accenture, Gap Inc., McDonald's, Pacific Gas and Electric, and the United Technologies Corporation, all of whom are here today. These 5 companies helped us to develop this program and have signed on to be a part of this brand new initiative. And they're going to invest their skills, their expertise, their people, and dollars to support and create a more high-impact partnership with community colleges. The goals that we've set out for Skills for America's Future are several. First is to create a certification for best-in-class partnerships that develop career pathway and training programs. The second is to recruit additional private sector and labor leaders to build a national network of high-impact partnerships at community colleges. Basically, we want to scale the program. We also want to provide a national voice for the effectiveness of these partnerships, and therefore to convene stakeholders to share best practices. Our 4th objective is to work with the interagency task force to align workforce programs funded by the Department of Labor and the Department of Education with market demands, to help the task force identify and develop stackable credentials in high-demand industries, and to increase the use of technology to improve training. Finally, we want to ensure that every state has at least one high-impact partnership between industry and a community college, and our hope is that every state will have more than one. Mr. President, this entire effort supports your goal for an additional 5 million community college degrees and certificates by 2020. And the initiative, we're very excited, the initiative will be part of what's called the Economic Opportunities Program at the Aspen Institute, led by an executive director and a core team, but the work will be nationwide. And our goal is that Skills for America's Future will launch a national movement to strengthen America's workforce, to optimize job training programs, and ultimately job placement. So we ask you, Mr. President, as you said earlier, to endorse Skills for America's Future, and we just can't begin soon enough. We believe putting the resources into training and development of workers, as you believe, is one of the best investments that we can make in our country. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Penny. Anna, you want to chime in, because I know you worked on this, and then I know traditionally sometimes people feel a little constrained in these conversations, but I'm going to make sure that I ask a couple of questions. I just want some top lines on where we think we can have the most impact most quickly on this. But go ahead, Anna.
Mr. President, thank you. I would say on behalf of the whole President's Economic Recovery Advisory Board, you really have given all of us an opportunity to come out from different perspectives and strategize around common issues that we all confront. And I think that the training discussions that Penny led brought us all an opportunity to hear from business leaders, education leaders, union leaders, and practitioners, and really get into what were the obstacles about in us being able to prepare the workforce for the future. We heard it from all different perspectives, and we were able to grapple with all of those. And so we heard what it was like for a worker who was struggling to get by, to figure out how to take advantage of opportunities at community colleges and elsewhere, at the same time as supporting their families. And we heard about employers who were struggling with finding the right talent at the right time, and community colleges having a hard time trying to understand how to get ahead of the economy and not just doing what they did before. And so these sessions gave us all an opportunity to learn from each other and understand that we have a long way to go. but that if we do it together, that we can really get someplace much further. And as our economy changes, and as people are struggling to hold on to their jobs and think about their future, we have these incredible opportunities. So from healthcare reform, as we move from a sick care to a well care program, we have the opportunity to create better jobs for home care workers to be in the community, and we